So we'll get started. My name is Kelly McGuire. I'm a principal partner at ZS Associates. I was on stage earlier this morning. I am a career revenue management data geek, but I'm also a career storyteller. So the fact that I could combine both of these things into one presentation session is really exciting to me because I think one of the most important skills that especially folks who work with data can have is the ability to tell stories with your data. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And why do I think this is so important? Well, if you think about your favorite stories, your favorite books, your favorite movies, they have things like action and adventure, and they have things like a hero's journey through space and time and epic battles between good and evil, and they have underdogs who triumph. And we love these stories for all of these elements. We love them because they make us laugh and they make us cry and they put us on the edge of our seats, and we can remember them when we want to relive and be happy and sad, and they have all of this excitement and passion that they elicit in us. But as commercial leaders, we have this or this, not exactly the same as Luke Skywalker. And so unfortunately, a lot of times it ends up, instead of the edge of our seats, we see this. And so you say to me, Kelly, you're talking about storytelling here, but we got a little bit stacked against us. So why even bother? Why even bother? Why does data and how can data contribute to a good story? Well, here's the thing. Incorporating storytelling into presentations is crucial because we want people to listen to us. We want to capture their attention. We want them to remember what we said. And importantly, we want them to take action on it. And that's what a good story makes us do in our personal lives. So we have to drag that into our professional lives to have all those outcomes that we want. It's crucial. It's crucial to our success. And also, it's not as hard as you may think. In fact, today, we're going to walk through 4 steps. We're going to talk about connecting with our audience. We're going to talk about finding a simple and compelling message, structuring a story logically, have a little fun. That's it. Bang, story. That simple. Now, centered in this and rooted in the challenge that we have as commercial leaders that work with a lot of data is this temptation that we have to go into our Excel spreadsheets, go into our Tableau visualization, copy and paste a bunch of charts all in a row in a PowerPoint deck and bring it into the meeting and just run through it with our audience. And this is the first easy but crucial mistake that we make as commercial leaders putting together a presentation, because a series of charts and graphs is not a story. We make the data the main character, but in reality, your message needs to be the main character. Your data in any presentation where you're trying to get people to listen, remember, and act, your data is at best a supporting actor, okay? So I'm going to start talking about how we tell a story with data, in parentheses. We will not talk about the data for a while. You will not see the data again for a while, okay? We're going to focus on storytelling. Okay, don't get uncomfortable. The data will be back. All right, so the first step I talked about here was connecting with your audience. And so if you think about your favorite stories, part of the reason why you love them so much is that it speaks to you in some way. And this is also really crucially important in storytelling, is making that connection with the audience, something that's going to resonate or be relevant to them. And this is very important, right, this connection with the audience, because we want to capture the attention, build the trust, your trust and credibility, their trust in you and your message, retain their interest, get them all the way through to the end, and enhance their understanding. A good connection with the audience has these positive outcomes, which makes them very receptive to remember and take action, right? Which we said are crucial to storytelling. So how do we connect with the audience? Well, the first step when you're putting together any story that you want to tell is to know your audience and understand your audience. So the first thing I do when I'm about to give a presentation is think about who I'm presenting to. And typically, we probably all do this, right? Okay, who's the audience? Well, it's the GM, it's the VP of sales, it's the asset manager. Great, next. Titles are not enough here, right? To really connect with the audience, we have to go beyond just the titles and think about who they are. What is their relationship with each other? Who do they report to? How well do you know them? How well do they know each other? Anything going on in their personal lives that might be relevant? Any of these sort of clues get you a little bit deeper into making that connection, a little bit deeper into targeting your message in the right way. But it doesn't just stop there with sort of building the profile of the folks that you're going to talk to and their relationships with each other. Really important next is to ask yourself, what do they know? And more importantly, what do they not know? One of the biggest mistakes, sorry front row, I'm going to wander and I put my back to you. But the slides are beautiful, so you got something to look at. So what do they know? Now, the other mistake I think we all make as commercial leaders is that we spend all day deeply immersed in our data. We love it. We roll around in it. We know it inside and out. We close our eyes and see it in our dreams, right? But our stakeholders don't. And so we have to take a realistic look at, how often do they see this data? Do they ever see it without me? Or are they as familiar with this data as I am? What do they know about the topic that I'm about to discuss? What do they not know? And you want to tune that message to the lowest common denominator in the room so that you don't lose anyone in this. And I think it's really easy for us to miss this because we assume a level of familiarity that we have that our audiences don't. So ask yourself, what do they know and what do they not know? And then how do they feel about it? Are they skeptical? Are they going to be excited because we've got good news? Are they going to be nervous because maybe things aren't looking the way they look? They want it to look. So how do they feel about what you might present? Again, this is going to help you to sort of mitigate any reactions that might distract people from remembering and acting. And we should know what's driving folks. Did someone make a commitment to stakeholders that we're trying to live up to here, and we're starting to slip off that commitment? Is this going to be the third quarter in a row that we're about to miss an expectation? Are bonuses on the line? Is this a pet initiative that you're reporting back on from someone in the room and they want to look good? Are they gunning for a promotion? So what is driving the audience? What's driving your listeners? And then finally, are there any external factors that you need to think about? So what's happening in the environment around? Do we have a new competitor in the market? Is some economic conditions we're worrying about, something happening in the larger environment that may be impacting people's reactions? So the whole idea here is the better you know the audience, the more you know how you're going to tune your message so that it is relevant and resonates with them and can drive the kind of impact you want. You want to be able to mitigate any risk of a negative reaction or anything that's going to make them stop listening to you and start arguing with you. And the more you ask yourselves these questions, and the deeper you get with this, the more likely it is that you'll be able to hit in the right spot. Now, I just spent a lot of time talking about how do they feel, what motivates them, how are they going to react. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I mean, this is business, right? It's not personal. So what does it matter what they're going to feel about this? Everyone should be objective when they look at my beautiful data. Well, if there's one thing we learned from the pandemic and one thing we all know, it's that people bring their full selves to work. And so while people may want to remain objective, they are going to have that first gut reaction to whatever you show them. And so understanding, and they may be driven by that, right? Excuse me. So understanding what that is likely to be will help you, again, to mitigate that, to help them work through it, or to at least understand, if you've thought this through, the look on their face when you say the thing you say, right? Help interpret. Feelings are crucial. People are going to bring their feelings to the table. And motivations are important too, because if you can align your presentation, your message, to the motivations of the people in the room, they're more likely to do the thing we want them to do, which is what? Take action. So think through these questions when you're about to approach a presentation with the audience. Can you understand goals, their past decisions, what they're looking for, what might be driving them? Any clues as to how you can tune this message so that you inspire them to action. I can tell you that in my world, with me and my teams, we spend the most time doing this, more time even than preparing the deck itself. We spend a lot of time talking about the folks that are going to be in the room, a lot of time thinking through what their motivations might be, because as a very important first step. So I promise you, you cannot spend too much time thinking this through. Now, over time, if you're really working with the same stakeholders over and over again, this will become easier and easier. But especially when you're going to be in front of a new room, critically important to hit the right notes in terms of knowing, connecting with your audience. All right, exercise number 1, commercial strategy meeting. Some of you are mad at me because you do this all week, and I'm going to make you scenario-base a commercial strategy meeting again. Some of you maybe don't sit in a commercial strategy meeting, but this is going to be the meeting where typically it's the hotel executive team, maybe the asset manager, and the commercial team, usually led by the revenue manager, is presenting their strategy, upcoming strategy, to this group of folks and trying to get the folks in the room to align behind what we're going to do for the upcoming period, okay? Now, I give you the titles, but what if we knew just a little bit more about these folks in the room? How would you approach your revenue strategy meeting or your commercial strategy meeting if this were the situation with the stakeholders in the room? And how would you think through whatever message you were going to deliver? What's important to note here, and what might some of the reactions, motivations, feelings be? And how might you adapt a message, either positive or negative, given this? All right, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes at your table to talk through this, or how you might, so the important thing is here, I haven't given you the message that you're going to deliver, but just think about the implications, right, of some of these relationships and some of these facts about these folks as you talk it through, and things you may be looking out for. All right, I'll give you about 5 minutes to think this through, and then we'll come back together and discuss it a little bit. I think we had some good conversation around this, and now I suspect a lot of folks are talking about where drinks are later, where our restaurant reservations are, very important topics. All right, so I debriefed with a couple of tables here, and I think what I see from this, and I'd love to hear if anyone had a different conversation. Your typical instinct in a commercial strategy meeting would be to tune it to the GM, because obviously the GM is the one that's going to make the final call and has to be the arbiter, and the GM is responsible for the P&L. But in this case, we know that the GM not only is pretty supportive, is kind of a fan of us, but also tends to hang back in meetings anyway. But we have 2 other folks here that have some skin in the game that might cause them to react in a different way, right? So we've got this DOSM that whose team is a little bit back on their heels and is liable to get defensive and want to make a play here for taking some things back. And you got an asset manager who's usually on your side, but feels like they're up for the next promotion and may want to sort of prove some things out. So if you hadn't gone through that exercise, you probably walk into the meeting talking to the GM, wondering why the GM isn't responding to you, and then suddenly you get blindsided by the other 2 folks in the meeting that have the agendas of their own. But in this case, we've seen how we probably have to tune this message in such a way that we're mitigating the DOSM's anxiety and possibly building up the asset manager, giving them confidence that you're going to be on their side to go for that promotion. And probably you're feeling pretty confident that the GM has your back. But you may want to stop by and make sure before you go into this meeting. Okay. Well, I lost the clicker. Who sees my clicker? What did I do with it? Seriously. Ahaha. Okay. I got so excited about the debrief that I left it over here. All right. Okay, so connecting with the audience. We kind of are starting to see why it matters if we know not just who the audience is, but what's motivating them and what might be relevant to them. So now let's talk about the message. This is step 2 on the, look, we're already on step 2, walking up the steps to a story. Defining your message. Okay, most important when we think about the message is the moral of the story, not the plot. So, does everyone know the story of the boy who cried wolf? Okay, so we got a little kid in the village, and he thinks it's really fun to rile everybody up by yelling wolf, and the elders all run around crazy, and batten down the hatches, and he laughs and does it over and over again. And finally, one day, he actually sees a wolf, and he cries wolf, and nobody does anything, and the wolves come in, and bad things happen. Okay, I just told you the plot, right? But the moral of the story is that liars never win. People don't believe you when you lie. You should not lie. Otherwise, your whole village will be eaten by wolves. Bit dramatic, but it gets the point across, right? So our message has to be that one concise, repeatable moral of the story that we want people to walk away with and remember. And so we start with the message before you put anything on a slide, right? What is it that I want people to take out of this? That they're going to listen to, importantly remember, and act on. Now, when it comes to the message and how you deliver it, I cannot emphasize this quote by Einstein enough, okay? Genius is making the complex simple, not making simple ideas complex. And this is very important to reinforce with commercial folks and people who work with data, because we love to make ourselves look smart by letting everyone know how hard it was and how complicated it was. All you will do in that case is lose your audience, okay? Simplify, simplify, simplify. Second thing I cannot say enough after know your audience. All right, so how do we do this? So you want your message to contain 4 key points. A clear vision of your intention. What is it you're trying to do? You got one concise main point, simple. Relevant to the audience, we just talked about that and how we do that. And it should promote a shift in thinking. This is a 45-minute workshop, not the 3 hours I usually teach, so I'm going to focus on 2 things that I think are pretty critical here and help us talk this through. So we talk about one concise main point. Okay, don't make it hard on your audience to understand what this main point is. So this goes back to that idea of making a complex idea simple. I'd love for you to take photos of every slide, but if you take photos of anyone, it should be this one, okay? Here is how you come up with a concise main point, all right? Stripping out unnecessary words. Repetition, small words, okay? All things that help make this concise main point. And you should literally write down your concise main point. Like, I know this seems like, oh, the message, I just want them to know that, we're doing awesome in the market and we should keep going with our programs, right? But I still think it really helps if you define that message, write it down, think about it, and then you can weave it through your presentation, because the best thing you want is when your stakeholders walk out of the meeting and they run into a colleague who couldn't make it on the elevator. What was that meeting about? And they can tell it to them, and you're standing behind proud because it was your exact message that you wrote down, right? So a good focus on this concise message that's easy to understand is helpful, okay? Concise, repeatable main point. All right, let's talk about making the audience think differently. This is a big aspiration, especially because a lot of us, when we're giving presentations or readout, it tends to be a readout, right? This is what happened. This is what they asked for. This is what happened. And make everybody aware. We're looking at past performance. So how am I going to make somebody think differently if I'm just showing them the same data that we look at every week together? Well, we need to promote shifts in thinking, again, so that we can be memorable and encourage people to take action. So even if it's a routine readout, what is different this time than last time? What did you try that was interesting? Or what kind of trend do you want to pick out? And you focus on that. And even in those readouts, you can promote that shift in thinking. And there are sort of 3 ways that you can do this. And we talked about emotions. So one way is to appeal to people emotionally. Guess what? We won. Everybody's excited. Look what we did, right? So that, again, makes people think differently. Oh, we won. Well, how did we do that? Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe we should try to do that again. Again, highlighting something new or different is obviously a good way to do that. And the third way is to make the next steps obvious. So promote that shift in thinking by saying, we're here at this point. What should we do next? Inspiring that audience to action and making them think differently, okay? So make that the goal. Even in some of your most routine presentations with the stakeholders you talk to all the time, you will come out more memorable, and your message will be stronger if you can make the audience think differently, promote a shift in thinking. All right, exercise. Identify a message. Now, this is very US-centric, possibly from a certain generation list of movies that I have here for our exercise. So feel free to pick something that resonates more with your table if you don't know these movies. But I want us to spend at our table, so pick a movie that everyone's familiar with, and think about what the message of that movie was, okay? And then have a little conversation about, would you adapt the message if you were talking to a teenager? Would you adapt the message differently if you were talking to your boss? So is that core message, should the movie's message hit differently if you're talking to a different audience? Again, feel free to not pick one of these, but I'll give you a few minutes to think that one through. All right, some good discussions. And I think, and some good tangents, right? But you know, look, it's difficult to distill these down to a couple words of wisdom, but I think what we can see, and this is what, I don't know, this is what the internet told me, the key messages of these were, I was, and I think, you know, we were also talking about how when I watched Karate Kid recently with my 3.5-year-old nephew, had to explain some things about the movie in a different way than, you know, don't immediately start punching your younger brother kind of thing. But anyway, I think, you know, so the exercise here is, you know, you're just distilling this down to the few key takeaways, what that 2.5 hours of content really made you think, and then how you might adapt that based on who your audience is. So speaking of this, so we've got the audience and we've got the message. So now we're ready to build the story, okay? We're ready to build the story. So how do we think about building a story? Well, an impactful story, right, it's informed by the audience insight and message. So we took care of that. We've got all of our background research done. We've got the core message. An impactful story has a logical flow of ideas, so we can bring the listener along with us. And it includes an opening, a body, and a call to action. So let's dig into the two we haven't talked about yet. Let's talk about a logical flow of ideas. Why do we need a logical flow of ideas? Well, we're going to bring the audience along with us. It has to be structured in such a way that it's coherent, and that it builds in the right way. So again, the audience can listen, remember, and take action. So I am going to present a couple of frameworks that we actually tend to use in consulting that I find to be really helpful when it comes to organizing a story. Okay, the first is called the pyramid. It's quite a logical, well-structured flow, but here you want to use the pyramid when the context of the problem is well known to everyone, right? So everyone is familiar kind of with the background here. And the best part about the pyramid is it gets to the insight right up front. So you lead with your main and most important insight, and then you dig in from there. So you're basically, you know, it's the ending first, right? And then you kind of support the main insight with some of those sub-insights. So you've got your main insight up front. You're starting to justify how you got to that main insight. And that's when you can infuse the data that supports those insights into the presentation, okay? So start with the main insight and then show how you got there. That's the pyramid structure. But again, best when the context is well known, the insight is going to be not too shocking for folks, and you provide enough backup and justification to kind of talk through why you arrived at that main point. We love the pyramid framework in consulting. It's a really good way to communicate, to organize and communicate our thoughts in client presentations. And of course, the other framework that I think can also be effective is quite the opposite, which is the funnel framework. Now, in this framework is actually best when you've got an unfamiliar context for your audience, or when your results are likely to be controversial or unintuitive. Now, if you started with that main insight first, and it was going to be controversial, the room would go nuts, and you would never get through, right? So here with the funnel, you're starting with building awareness of the topic. You're talking about the landscape, what's going on. You get things that folks may want to consider, When it comes to the landscape, you provide a little additional detail and context. That's probably where your data comes in, right in that middle layer. And you lead the audience to the action or the insight or the outcome. So by the time you get to that last or main point, you've brought them along with you. So either you've built up familiarity, so they'll understand what you're asking, or you've dispelled some of the what might potentially be controversial, and they've come along with you to get to that main point. But these are two: pyramid, where you start with that insight first, funnel, where you start with awareness first, depending on the situation, two really easy ways to structure and have that logical flow of ideas. So you get that main message embedded in the insights that support or defend it. All right, so we talked about this logical flow. And sort of the last thing when we talk about structuring the story, the thing that makes the difference between a presentation and a story is that a presentation really is just sort of in that middle bit. It's like the significant stuff, collection of ideas. But a story hooks you in at the beginning, and then at the end leaves you with a call to action. Now, we sometimes do that hook at the beginning to set the context when we do our presentations. Always we forget the call to action. So remember, you bucket that story with drawing the audience in with that hook, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them with the pyramid or the funnel, or however it is you want to structure that. And then make sure you tell them what you want them to do about it. Now, that should be obvious from the story, but if you leave that call to action out, then your audience may just forget to be inspired and take action in the way you want them to, okay? All right. I'm going to, when we think about pulling together those presentations, I've got a few key tips that I like to kind of give to really bring the storytelling element in and help bring your audience along. Again, the difference between a presentation and a story is in the way that you kind of structure some of the information. So one of the important key tips, especially if you're dealing with unfamiliar information, is to use analogies and metaphors to make the unfamiliar familiar. Now, for those of you that took high school English long ago, or I guess high school language class, whatever, long ago, here is the definition of analogy and metaphor. But it's basically relating a situation someone may be unfamiliar with to something they are familiar with. Now, my classic example is how I explained revenue management to my mother. So when I got into this discipline, I was trying to tell her what I did. It was very complicated, very confusing, but it just so happened that this was at a time when this particular video game was like hitting the mainstream and my mother was obsessed. So I finally figured out, I'm like, look, Mom, hotel revenue management is like a game of Tetris. I mean, think about it. The hotel has a bunch of rooms, just like all those spaces on the Tetris board, and people want to stay in those rooms, but they have different characteristics. Like some want to stay for 2 nights, and some want a king, and some want a double. And some want to come on Monday, and some want to come on Friday. And so my job as a revenue manager is to fit all those different pieces of demand, like the Tetris pieces, into the rows without leaving any spaces. And if I can do that, I get all the points. My mother's understood since that day exactly what it is that hotel revenue management does. And she was like, but Kelly, wouldn't it be better if you knew what space was coming, what piece was coming next? Yeah, Mom, that's a forecast. So anyway, anytime that you can get an analogy, or by the way, feel free to use this. I don't even know if the kids know what Tetris are these days, but I bet the moms still do. This was, so analogies, metaphors, right? Good idea. The other tip is context, right? Very important. And this is something, again, now we're going to bring our friend the data back in here. I'm going to show you some data for the data is back. But when the data is complex, it's really important to provide context so that your audience can interpret what it is that they're seeing. So I'm going to give you an example. This is a super complex data set that I presented last year at the ROC in the US, okay? I'm going to show you 2 slides. I'm going to have you look at it, see if you can figure out what I was talking about, all right? So I'm comparing satisfaction impact from 19 to 21, recognizing this is a big room and this is small. And this is from 21 to 23, okay? So here it is again, that's 19 to 21, and here's 21 to 23. All right. Who could tell me what I just showed you? No one. Yeah. There's a lot of dots, a lot of chart. I flicked back and forth really fast. And that's probably about as much time as your audience would have to interpret one of your charts in a meeting, okay? So what if I did this? There's a little bit more, I put a box around the stuff that I want you to look at, okay? So now we got 19, 21, 21 to 23. A little easier? Okay, we saw some boxes shift on that center line. So that was cool. I've got some red and green on there, so we know one side was probably negative and something that was negative turned positive. So yeah, it's a little better. Better labeling, some better indication. So a little bit better, right, with a little bit more context. How about this? Now, again, I know the print's a little small for the back of the room. All right, and then we'll give you this one. Okay, by the way, if you're interested in this data, approach me after. It was actually this was a study that we did of using unstructured feedback from TripAdvisor from all the hotels in the US, change in satisfaction between 19 to 21 compared to change in satisfaction between 21 to 23. So this was sort of in the pandemic, return to travel, what was driving both. I don't know what happened over here, but in the US we had a major satisfaction crisis in the immediate post-pandemic return to travel in 21 because we didn't set the right expectations for service levels at the hotel. So we were trying to see if we had kind of turned the tide on that in the years since that return to travel period. So if you're interested in that study, please come and see me. It's pretty interesting stuff. But that said, look at the impact that the context on that last slide made. So guiding the audience towards the insights that I wanted them to see. So things like this is, you saw the difference in that header, right? We call that a talking header. So resist just labeling this is the data I'm showing you, but put an insight right up front in big letters. Now I know this is a big room, but everybody in the back could read that header and at least get what they were supposed to see from there. Takeaway boxes, call-outs, boxing things in, using color coding, right? All of this guides your audience to what it is you want them to see. And you know what the other thing it does? It hides what it is you don't want them to see, okay? Because the worst thing you can do is give a GM a chart full of data and not tell them what you want them to look at, and they're gonna find the one thing you don't want them to look at, right? Happened every time with my team. I kept telling them, don't bring the Excel sheet into the COO. You know he's gonna find that thing you don't want him to see. All right, so how'd I do? I came here today to do a story workshop. I wanted to be a model of how we tell a story and how we tell it with data. So let's evaluate. Connect with the audience. All right, you can tell me, don't tell me now, it might hurt my self-esteem. Think to yourself, did I connect? Did I land this at the right level for this audience? My message, at least the one I intended to give you, learn to tell the story first, the data part follows. If you become an effective storyteller, you will figure out how to make that data the supporting character. That was my main message. Logical flow, I had a 4-step framework, that's what we followed. So I showed you that at the beginning, we walked our way through it, I'm talking about it at the end. I had my hook, sleepy audiences and our favorite movies, or at least mine. Had the 4-step framework and the significance in the middle. Call to action, give me a minute and you'll see. All right, listen, I had a step 4, and it is this. When you are giving a presentation, don't forget to have fun. We have to spend the majority of our lives at work doing things like this, might as well get a little enjoyment out of it. I think even in the most complex data-driven presentations, if you find the joy in it, you find the passion, you let that show through your voice, you let that show through your emotion, you take the work seriously but not yourselves. This is all part of being engaging, drawing the audience in, and inspiring them not only to take action, but to show up the next time you're on stage, or I guess in the conference room, and call a meeting. So don't forget to have fun. To me, that's a crucial step 4. And that was my close. Thank you all very much for your attention. I hope this helped.